First tonight, strikes by Israel and Iran have continued overnight as the conflict between the two countries intensifies. Israel says 8 people have been killed in a third night of Iranian bombardment of residential districts in Tel Aviv, Haifa and other cities, bringing the total number of deaths to 24. Health officials say nearly 300 people have been admitted to hospital as Iranian missiles light up the night sky. Rescue teams are still searching for people who could be under the rubble of buildings that have been struck in central and northern Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli military says its fighter jets have attacked the headquarters of the Quds Force of Revolutionary Guards in Tehran. The Iranian Health Ministry says more than 220 people have been killed by Israeli attacks. Correspondents say the recent strikes have gone beyond military targets, hitting government buildings and energy facilities in what appears to be a strategy aiming at the country's regime.
What I've seen upstairs in the destroyed apartment is evil, pure evil in and of itself. And it's evil aimed at innocent civilians all over Israel. And we are fighting as much as possible. And I call upon the leaders of the free world convening in Canada in the G7 summit. They all should stand up with us and make it clear. 2 things absolutely must. Iran must not have any capability of nuclear weapons. And secondly, bring back our hostages as soon as possible, till the last one of them immediately.
The board must condemn Israeli aggression in its strongest term and hold it accountable. Otherwise, consequences would be with those appeasing this aggressor child killer regime. We urged in this meeting the Board of Governors and the IAEA not to allow their initial failure to prevent aggression to be followed by subsequent failure and to take a strong and effective remedial action.
Well, Israel's attacks on Iran's nuclear facilities are being discussed today at a special meeting of the UN nuclear watchdog. The head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, told the UN Security Council on Friday that Israel had hit Iran's nuclear facilities at various locations, as well as the country's main uranium enrichment plant in Natanz. Mr. Grossi said the attacks were of a major concern, and he said they needed to take appropriate radiological measures in order to deal with leaks inside the plants that have been hit.
Madam President, we strongly and unequivocally condemn the barbaric and criminal attack. A series of targeted assassinations were against senior military officials, nuclear scientists, and innocent civilians. So far, 78 people, including senior military officials, have been martyred and over 320 others injured. The overwhelming majority of them civilians, including women and children, affirms its inherent right to self-defense as enshrined in Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran will respond decisively and proportionately to these acts of aggression at a time, in a place, and by means of its choosing. This is not a threat. This is the natural, legal, and necessary consequence of an unprovoked military attack. Iran's response will be firm, lawful, and essential to restore deterrence, defend our sovereignty, and uphold the principles of international law. No aggressor can be allowed to act with impunity.
Iran confirmed that initially only the Natanz fuel enrichment plant had been attacked in today's strikes. This facility contains the fuel enrichment plant and the pilot fuel enrichment plant. At Natanz, the above ground part of the pilot fuel enrichment plant, where Iran was producing uranium enriched up to 60% uranium-235, has been destroyed.
We waited for diplomacy to work. We gave the international community time. We watched negotiations stretched on as Iran made forced concessions or refused the most fundamental conditions. All the while, Iran continued to build toward the unthinkable. Last night, the wait ended.
But for civilians in Iran, the last few days of fighting have been very difficult and dangerous. There isn't the same sophisticated air defense system there that Israel has, and often strikes have caught the people completely by surprise. Iran restricts access to the country for journalists, but we've managed to get in touch with one person inside of Iran, but we will get to talk to the person some other time as he has had to evacuate his home. Well, we'll move ahead right now. The world leaders from G7, that's Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the UK, as well as the US, are meeting in Canada for a three-day summit that began on Sunday. It is the first face-to-face gathering of world leaders since Israel's strike on Iran. The summit is expected to be dominated by the unfolding crisis in the Middle East and the tariffs and the ongoing trade war within the G7. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the International Affairs Analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz. Thank you so much for making out time to be with us today. All right, so there are quite a lot of new leaders at this G7 summit. The Canadian Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, Japanese Prime Minister, the German Chancellor of well, all new to the seat. Donald Trump is kind of an old new hand, so to speak, and is as well as the Italian Prime Minister. And of course, the dean of it all is Emmanuel Macron of France. How interesting do you reckon the dynamics will be with all these new leaders who are kind of grappling with the whole G7 concept?
Well, the dynamics are, of course, set beforehand quite simply because America has a different worldview now to Western Europe, indeed the rest of the West. And that this is the key point. Whether the new leaders and how they will cope with it is another matter. But so far, for example, the British Prime Minister has coped with the tariffs issue with USA. And so therefore, it's by no means significant that there are new leaders there. Rather, it is the problem whether G7 has any sense, like NATO, if America is going off in one direction and the other countries go off in another. Moreover, there is the whole tariffs issue still to be resolved, which means that there's, if you like, not just a point of philosophy being different, but also, if you like, a dispute of sorts. Especially, of course, added to the tariffs is the veiled proposition, threat, however you want to put it, that America would like to take over Canada, which is adding to it. So therefore, not only is America and the rest of us going in different directions, but on top of that, they're mildly antagonistic to some degree. However, there is, of course, the issue of Russia and the issue of Iran and Israel now to consider. And here it is expected to be lots of discussions, especially about the latter, but quite how people with different views will resolve these is yet to be seen.
And indeed, of course, the G7 summits during Donald Trump's first term were very, very tense, with Mr. Trump refusing to be part of any joint statement. Now, do you see that trend continuing at this 2025 summit?
Yes. In fact, it's got to the point whereby it has been suggested that these summits could be held without USA. Although, like NATO without USA, the summits without USA are scarcely of any point to them at all. And therefore, there will be the summit, but any joint communiques will have to be very carefully worded. And if they're not to Donald Trump's liking to the slightest degree, he will not join in. And so therefore, whatever communique will come down was likely to be essentially of little value, because it's either what Donald Trump wants or else doesn't exist. And since not everybody agrees with what Donald Trump wants, the communiques are unlikely to actually mean much. In a word, in a nutshell, the West is now a broken entity in the summit, just as it was with NATO.
Now, with Trump in attendance and Mark Carney, of course, chairing this meeting for the first time, someone said that having Trump in attendance will be a bit like trying to bravely stare down a grizzly bear, knowing that if you get too close, the bear might maul you. So a great deal of tact is required, otherwise it could be catastrophic, couldn't it?
Yes, indeed. Actually, there has been a success. Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has managed to get an agreement about tariffs to not exactly 100% agreement, but a fair way. It is possible to deal with Donald Trump in a tactful manner. But at the end of the day, Britain and USA have a very close relationship and other countries don't. And it's unlikely that the tact will be, how can I put it, as good and have as easy a time of it as between Great Britain and America. And therefore, it is indeed quite that. The question is to how far Donald Trump can be pacified. In fact, I would also add, it's by no means clear he'll stay the whole 3 days if he doesn't like how the talks are going. He has quite definite views, and either you follow those views or you do not, as of course, as Zelensky discovered when he visited the White House.
And these summits used to be like a part on the back sessions, but now there are so many divisions on things like the Middle East you mentioned earlier and trade. What wouldn't give to be a fly on the wall? So what will success look like at this particular 2025 edition?
Success would be any joint communiques at all. Success would be the West working together at all about the Iranian-Israeli conflict, or for that matter, the Russian-Ukrainian, please don't forget that, and whilst we're at it, the Israeli-Gazan conflicts as well. This is unlikely. Success would be that the American and Canadians can finally agree on some sort of joint future in the sense that they're no longer one threatening the other. Success would be that the tariffs issue would be resolved. As you can see, all this is largely a wish list. More than likely, there will be strong words stated sooner or later by Donald Trump, which will lead, if they don't watch out, to a crisis rather akin to one with Zelensky, which in itself would be a disaster in the sense that the West will be shown up yet again not to be united, much to the benefit, of course, of Russia and, of course, anyone else like China, who has long faced, as you rightly pointed out, G7s and a united West against them.
All right, so before I let you go, there's some people have argued that the world has changed a lot and the G7 still has not. And people wonder why the likes of China, the world's second biggest economy, isn't part of it. And they question why Brazil and India are not even part of it as well. Is it a failure of the global north to really understand what's going on in the world, that the West is increasingly becoming a smaller part of the world's population and its economy, and is trying to preserve its rule-based order in the changing world order?
Yes, and in fact, this is the point that China has been making. It wants to see a multipolar world, which incidentally Russia does too. You've said G7, it used to be G8 with Russia. Please note, Russia is now persona non grata, obviously. But the fact of the matter is, these summits, if they are to be the summits of the big and the successful, then there's no obvious reason at all why China and India shouldn't be there. I mean, in particular, China. It's bigger than some of the other nations that G7 put together. And so what it becomes is the G7 is really, if you like, a sort of Western club to which other nations may or may not be invited, probably not, which is the very thing that annoys the Chinese and indeed the Russians, but especially the Chinese, the Indians, and indeed other nations. There's, as you pointed out, Brazil. In fact, there's a question why there should be a G7 in the sense of a closed club where people meet smoking cigars and make up their mind what to do with the rest of the world.
All right, so but before I let you go, I would love to have your opinion on the escalation of tensions between Iran and Israel. How do you see this playing out?
The key question is no longer one of diplomacy. That's gone. The key question is no longer one of, if you like, of negotiation. The key question is brute force. Can the Iranians carry on fighting? Can the Israelis? Now, Israel can call upon the arsenal of America, and therefore it can carry on for some time. But can Iran, and this is the question, can Iran simply withstand the Israeli assault? Because it's quite clear what Israel's doing is degrading Iran so they'll be unable to actually produce and threaten Israel. However, Israel cannot invade Iran. Some of the facilities that Iran have are underground. And in the long run, this is going to be also an important matter. In other words, will Iran carry on or submit? One key player in this is Russia, but it's become quite clear that Russia doesn't see its role of helping Iran simply as a moderator, and therefore we're back to my original question: can Iran carry on fighting and hold out? On balance, if pressed, I would say Iran will try and carry on for some time.
All right, thank you. Many thanks to you, Dr. Marek Laskiewicz, International Affairs Analyst. Thank you for your time.